"I can't take it anymore. I quit," I said in a trembling voice to my boss over the phone. I was only 40 years old and the CFO of a division of a large public company and highly successful by any measure. But I was really stressed out, and I hadn't slept for days, and I wasn't going to tell anyone about my mental health condition. I saw no way out but to quit. My message today is for everyone, but especially men who don't often seek professional help and think they can deal with it all on their own. And sadly, too often it ends in suicide. We need to end the stigma around mental illness. I want you to leave here today remembering three things. Mental illness is real, mental illness is common, and most importantly, mental illness is treatable. Mental illness is real. 18 years ago, my boss tried to convince me not to quit and to see a doctor, but I refused. If I had a physical illness like cancer, I certainly would have told other people and gotten professional help. My next 90 days at work were brutal. I stayed until my successor joined. I avoided people. I played 2 holes of golf the entire summer, and golf is my favorite pastime. I didn't know what depression was, but I was clinically depressed. Finally, my last day of work came, and my wife urged me to see a doctor. And I took the depression screening test. It has 10 or 15 questions on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 meaning that the depression symptom happens nearly every day. I scored a 5 in nearly all. I was talking slowly. I had no interest in things that I enjoyed. I couldn't concentrate. Forcing myself to take one step forward, I began to exercise daily, and it helped. I started taking an antidepressant, and I saw a counselor. And slowly, my depression symptoms began to lift. I started to enjoy things again, so I stopped taking my antidepressant. In retrospect, I realized my depression wasn't treated then, as I quickly declined 2 great job offers that fall because I was convinced that I was a failure and I could never be a business leader again. The next 3 years were relatively good without work. I had time to enjoy our kids' school activities. We had wonderful family time at our cabin, and I began playing golf again. But in the fall of 2008, things began to deteriorate rapidly. I had no purpose in my life. The stock market crashed, and I was convinced we were going to lose all of our money. And I remember thinking to myself, what have I done? I've ruined our family. I'll never be able to work again. The CEO of Ryan Companies called me in December of 2008, encouraging me to consider being their next CFO. And out of fear, I quickly responded, "No, thank you. I'm not interested." My depression snowballed that winter. It was brutal. My symptoms got worse. All of them came back that I had before. I rarely left the house. My doctor said, "I can't take care of you anymore. You need a psychiatrist." I reluctantly saw a counselor only to appease my wife, and he said, "I believe you need to enter the workforce again and enter your fear head on." But because I believed I was a failure, I botched the 3 job interviews I had to ensure I wasn't going to be employed again. I lost 30 pounds. I didn't answer any phone calls from my best friend when he called. I had a hard time sleeping. I was useless at home. My wife said to me, "You need to move forward, or you may need to move out." And her words didn't even faze me. And hardest of all for me to admit is I prayed at night for a week that I would die to end the mental pain. Mental illness is real. Mental illness is common. 2 summers ago, a friend of mine also living with depression invited 9 other CEOs to dinner to discuss 3 topics. And the first was mental health. He asked me to share my depression story, and I did. And I did so with the hope that the others would take back to their circles of influence the message that I shared, with the hope they would join me in ending the stigma around mental illness. Then there was the longest period of uncomfortable silence I can remember, and I said, "What did I just say?" Eventually, one of the CEOs said tearfully, "When I was 5, my mom died by suicide." Then another said, "This fall, my son tried to take his life in college." Some others shared similar stories, and after dinner that night, another one came up to me privately and said, "I'm dealing with anxiety now, Brian. What can I do?" Mental illness does not distinguish. It even impacts executives. Mental illness is common. Most importantly, though, I want you to know mental illness is treatable. I continued to exercise every single day, and I took my antidepressant, and I found a new counselor who incorporated spirituality into psychotherapy, and things improved for me in the spring of 2009. He helped me dispel the lie I was telling myself that I was a failure and regain my confidence. And so I had the courage to call back the CEO of Ryan Companies to see if the CFO position was still available. I dialed him up 3 times and hung up before he would answer because I was fearful. I tried a 4th time and he answered too fast. And he said, "Brian, your timing is perfect. We just reopened the search." I joined the company 4 months later, right at the beginning of the Great Recession. The next year was really challenging, but I quickly learned that I was not a failure and I was an effective business leader. That was 14 years ago, and my mental health has been in a good place ever since. But I don't take any day for granted. Every morning I wake up and I take my antidepressant. I spend some quiet time in meditation, and I exercise. And I still see a counselor periodically. And I'm now able to share the only gift that came from my depression, and that is telling my story publicly and privately with the hope that others, especially men, will know they're not alone and get professional help. There are examples of how I've been able to share my story to help others, and I want to share 2 of them with you. Earlier this spring, I got a call from a CEO that I know late at night who was having suicidal ideations. I listened, and I was able to persuade him to get help, and he did. Last year, I told this same story I'm telling you today to all the employees in our company. And we have our construction workers and architects who are in the 2 highest industries of suicide. And shortly after telling my story, I got an email from one of our employees who said, "Brian, I quit my job yesterday. I needed immediate help or something tragic was going to happen." Mental illness is treatable. Out of fear, I made the phone call to quit my first CFO job. Out of fear, I almost didn't make the phone call to re-enter the workforce. But neither of these calls would have mattered if I had only made the first call, the call for help. I hope you leave here today inspired to encourage people you know who might be dealing with anxiety or depression to get help. I hope you might feel motivated, that you might know people considering to become mental health care professionals and encourage them that they will be really good. And I hope you will feel energized to join me in ending the stigma around mental illness, knowing that mental illness is real, mental illness is common, and most importantly, mental illness is treatable. Thank you.